What's up, guys? How you doing? Welcome back to the Be Official podcast. I'm your host, your guy, Paul Payne 837, and today we'll be reacting to a clip. No, not necessarily a clip, but an interview I found by. It's an interview of TD Jakes on Power Breakfast Club, on the Breakfast Club. You know, so he says something. He says something that is very, very profound, and something that is just. Something that you can reflect on, you know, especially like for me who grew, like, let's say for people like me who are African best and grew up in an African home, you know. So these are things that we ought to do different from our parents, you know. So yeah, so let's dive deep. It talks about how children should be allowed to be disruptive thinkers, you know. So let's go. Join me.
On the back burner that you're waiting on enough money to capitalize. Yeah. Take them off the back burner. Form partnerships. Build alliances. Go. Because if you don't go now, you're not going to get there. The child that you're raising that looks rambunctious could be disruptive, could be creative, could be a leader. Sometimes we punish kids down into submission and teach them to feel like a slave. Sit down. Do what I told you to do.
Can you relate? Can you relate?
I said so. All of that kind of stuff.
You sound just like me.
She said you sound just like me.
I said so. We're not teaching our children to think.
Yeah.
So disruptive thinking is about the unique gift God gave.
I think he was promoting his book. He has a book called Disruptive Thinking. So I look forward to reading this book, man. Seems very interesting, you know. So yeah.
Gave us with the brain before we had a laptop. This is a computer. This is hardware. The problem is we're not programming this computer with good stuff, with smart stuff, with stuff that's intimidating, that makes you walk into a room and feel shy to speak up. That's a good room to be in.
Yeah.
So as a parent, being a disruptor is allowing your kids.
But before Envy comes in, I think, you know, he says something about, you know, training the mind and just having a mindset that is so smart. I feel like kids, you know, kids are very, very smart beings, right? Because they learn through your actions. And this is why I said in the first place, you know, growing up in an African home and just like seeing how your parents, you know, correlate to each other. It's kind of, you know, what we grew up on, why you find your parents don't show love to each other like in the public eye, right? Like where you know how Western, like how the Western culture is, right? Where you see parents, you know, hug each other when probably the husband or the wife knocks, you know, whoever comes in at that moment, you know, they'll be there, you know, hugging each other, showing each other love, you know, saying I love you and all that kind of stuff, right? But it's kind of different like growing up in an African home because you rarely see all these things, right? So it even becomes hard like for you to even show that, right? Because you never saw that. So that's what I'm saying. Kids really pick up on your actions more than what you say, you know? That's why you find what you do is what they mimic. So, yeah. So I think what we like in most instances, right? Like the things that I've seen and the things that we talk about mostly is you have to be really intentional about what you do, especially when you're around kids. You know, you really need to be intentional. If you really want them to act in a certain way, you really need to be intentional with your actions, right? Let's continue and see what Evie says.
To be disruptors.
A room and feel shy to speak up. That's a good room to be in.
Yeah.
So as a parent, being a disruptor is allowing your kids to be disruptors.
Allowing your children to discover who they are and looking closely at them to guide them toward things that they're good.
Allowing your kids to be who they are. I think for me that really strike, right? And so I'm saying, you know, I'm relating all this to the African setup, right? It's a very difficult. I think it's only now that parents being a little bit flexible with seeing kids, do what they do. But again, at a certain point when you grow up, you kind of start understanding them, because all they want is just the best for you. So if what they did is accounting and they feel like accounts is what is going to do better for you, they ought to take you down that lane, so that's what they were taught also. So it's like being passed on to generation. But I feel like now, with all this knowledge that we know now, right, like us who understand, like I'm not saying that didn't understand, but all I'm saying is us now, with all this knowledge that we have now, right, like we ought to do better, where we allow our children to be themselves. Okay, there's a part where he speaks about him being in the pastory section and not forcing his kids to do being a bishop or being a pastor and stuff, like just living up. So let's continue and listen.
Good at that they can excel at. My grandson came to me and he said, I like working in the arts. And I got on the phone and I called a friend of mine who works for Dallas Broadway, and I said, I've got a grandson in town. Would you consider at least interviewing him for a job? What am I doing? I'm putting him in the field of his dreams.
Yeah, right. See, everybody ain't got the grandfather like you.
Yeah, that's true. That's
my
true.
son.
She says, not everybody has a grandfather like you, right? So here he is having a grandson who loves art, right? And him knowing people who are in art, he calls up, right? Like, hey, I have a grandchild who loves art. Would you want to interview them into that? So it's rare that you'll find that in the African setup. It's only now I think things are developing and people are seeing things happen. Like when we see the likes of the Peterson Daka, the fashion Sakalas, football back in the day was just a sport that was looked down on, Like you tell your parents you want to be a footballer, mama. I think even in school back in the days when you were asked like, what do you want to be? If anybody mentioned ball, football, music, I think these were careers that were looked down on, So like seeing how the world is also changing and how things are now, it's it's crazy, man. It's really crazy. But listen to what she says, right?
Told my father he wanted to be a football player. My father like you.
Yeah, that's true. That's
my
true.
son told my father he wanted to be a football player. My father don't know no football players. You can't call up Ray Lewis. Jeez.
But something, if you're really gifted, somebody's going to see it.
Yeah,
somebody's going to see it if you're really gifted, and you have to put yourself out there.
True. So listen to what he says, right?
Yeah.
Somebody's going to see it if you're really gifted, and you have to put yourself out there. If you don't know, I didn't have them either. My father.
I think one thing, right? Instead of complaining about how our parents didn't handle us well, how our parents did this and that, how our parents blah blah blah, we can go on and on. But a person who doesn't put blame on other people, right, is a person who starts creating solutions. So instead of being in a position where now you start blaming your parents, like, no, if it wasn't for them, I would be here. Quite all right. Yeah, but what are you supposed to do about that? Are you going to be in your 70s and still blaming your parents at where you are? So it's all about understanding and saying things happen the way they happen, but I think it's now time for you to put yourself out there, being in a position where you strive, because it says one or another, somebody who will notice and who, like, they will see how gifted and talented you are. So it's being in a space where you understand and you digest, sit down, know who you really are, know what you love, and man, you gotta chase that dream like no man's business. Chase it.
Father died when I was 16. Wow. My grandfather was murdered by white racists in Mississippi when he was 22. Wow. So didn't have. Powdered eggs, powdered milk. Okay, I grew up on the rags.
So I think he's digging deep into his past, right? Like trying to show an example of what she was asking, because he didn't grow up in a place where everything was given to him, where there was a table already set for him to go and sit. His parents died when he was very young. His father died when he was very young, you know. So all these things for him, he had to put himself out there and, you know, chase the dream. So no excuses, man. Don't wake up to excuses. Trust me. A person who's full of excuses, let's go different. I didn't say something.
But my mother knew how to make a quilt out of it. Grew up on the rags of life. But my mother knew how to make a quilt out of it. And she was bad, she was strong, she was resourceful, she was creative. My father got sick when I was 10, he died when I was 16, so I didn't grow up with any silver spoons anywhere.
Yeah.
So you disrupted your whole family's lineage.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. And took them with me.
So what got you into, you probably answered this question up here, but somebody asked me and I don't remember, what got you into ministry, right? With what happened to your grandfather, what happened to your father? A lot of people would say they wouldn't believe because of this. There's so many negative outcomes that happen in their life, but it seemed like it totally made the opposite for you.
That's a great question. It made me, pain drove me to him, not from him. Thirst makes you go to water. Hunger makes you go get it.
I kind of relate with him because by the end of the day, you know, it's the pain that drives you to wanting stuff so bad, you know, and trying to prove to yourself that these things are achievable, right? He gives a good example. Thirst leads you to water. Damn. Man, you gotta love this man. God.
Get up and eat. So I used the void to find my heavenly father because I missed my earthly father. So you know, the analogy is made in scripture that blessed is the man whose quiver is full of arrows. The analogy means that children are like arrows. So if they're like arrows, the more you pull them back, the further they go. So when life pulls us back the hardest, the people who have been pulled back the hardest generally shoot forward the furthest. Okay, everybody sitting here, there's something that pulled you so far back that when you got loose, you said, that's never going to happen again. You understand?
God. That's a very powerful example, man. Like, the people who have been hurt the most, these are people who strive for the best, right? You might argue, yeah, I know, but, you know, there are people who are just so determined that they are willing to change things for themselves. These are people, that's why he calls, these are people who are in the category of disruptive thinking, because they're in a space where they've been hurt so much, they carry this weight on them, right? And they don't want to go back to that place anymore, right? That's why he's saying the people who have been pushed very much, but it's like a catapult, right? My leg, knee, the further you pull, right? The further the stone goes, or whatever that you're going to use, right? So I think it's being in a place where you understand and know where you come from and know the place that you are at and understanding the things that you want in life, you know, like you staying down doesn't benefit you in any way. Being in a place where you're always pitying yourself, feeling sorry for yourself, you know, like always looking down on yourself, I think that's when you even cut down your power. That's when you then chop down the person that you were really created for. So being in a place where you fall but you rise back again, it doesn't matter how many times you fall, but the key part is you getting up, rising up. Man, such a good example.
Far back that when you got loose, you said, that's never going to happen to me.
Yeah.
Right? You understand? That's never going to happen to me again.
Yeah.
And so what I try to do is expose my children to everything and then release them. You don't have to be a preacher. Like the law, you don't have to be a preacher. You don't have to be a successor. You don't have to do any, you don't have to be a prop in my play. You have.
I think this is the example I gave in the first place, right? Like where African parents back in the day, even now it still happens, right? But back in the day it was more heavy than now because of the successes of how the other people, in fact, even just how the world has changed itself, you know, like they'll force you to doing the things that they have done, right? Because that's what they thought is better for you, and that's what they thought works because they have been in those shoes before, so
you don't have to be a successor. You don't have to do any. You don't have to be a prop in my play. You have to write a script that fits your gifting.
Yes.
And live up to your potentials. And you don't have to mimic me because there's nothing worse than being a cheap copy of a great original.
Cheap copy. This is where now the Be Official comes in, to all the new subscribers on YouTube, Spotify, or my page, Facebook, everywhere. This is where we call ourselves the Be Officials because here we all encourage each other to be yourself. Like you ought to be yourself in each and every department that you are in, It doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter where you at, but you have to be who God created you to be. Never mimic or never be like somebody else, because everybody else is taken, man. You have to live in your full potential, like what God created you to be. So what's your vision? That's the question. Make it official, stay official, be official.
Okay, you want to be an original.
Yes.
And the disruptive thinking that I'm talking.
You have to be official. I think, let me correct the big man there. He was supposed to say, you have to be official. So, yeah.
Great original. Okay, you want to be an original. And the disruptive thinking that I'm talking about is in lieu of the fact that we don't have Big Mama anymore. We don't have anybody talking to us. We don't always have fathers talking to us. We don't have people who wish us well. We're so busy trying to strike points against each other that we don't do like other communities where they build each other up, where they support each other, where they get behind each other.
Especially like for the community, let me speak on Z, right? The tendency of tearing each other up, man, I think the tendency is really, really, really getting intense day by day, especially when it comes to social media. Because of how it's, the freedom of speech and just the freedom of, having this device in your hands, that's just so powerful to a point whereby you can get away with anything. You can talk about, you can throw shades at anybody at any time, without even thinking twice. It's really, really bad, it's really bad because these are things that are breaking us day by day as humans. We are supposed to be going hand in hand, but, the Western culture has really put us in a place where we feel like we can't be together on top. It's like on top, there's only one person who can go there. So immediately, let's say Paul makes it. Oh man, it's like now hell loose. We got to bring him down. He can't be there. He doesn't deserve to be there. But me getting there is like an opportunity for me to pick up other people, right? So I love Jakes, man. I
like to see these where they build each other up, where they support each other, where they get behind each other. We like to see each other crash and burn, and then build our career off of the smoke.
Yep.
I don't think that's a stable foundation to stand on.
No.
Like most people who I've seen build that type of foundation, eventually that foundation crumbles.
It crumbles every time. It crumbles. There's no way I can push you up and not go up too. So if I start pushing you up and saying wonderful things about you, you up, the further I push you up, the higher I have to go to do it. Okay, so when you get that mentality, and in order to do that, you have to be secure enough to lift somebody else.
Right.
So when you start talking about disruptive thinking, you give away what you want.
Yeah.
You want love, you have to give love. You want peace, you have to give peace. You want to be understood, you have to seek to understand.
Yeah.
Okay, so disrupting the way we think changes the way we grow. Then I talk about disruptive alliances. What is Charlemagne doing with TD Jakes? What is TD Jakes doing with Charlemagne? That doesn't go together. Disruptive alliances create environments for majestical things to happen. If we just stop only aligning with people who do what we do, think what we think, and look like what we look like, we can do some amazing stuff together. And I give quite a few examples. For example, the Civil Rights Movement, if it hadn't been for Lyndon Johnson, wouldn't have got the Bill of Rights passed. And yet,
I think I won't do the whole thing. If you want to watch the interview, you can go on and watch the interview. But I think this is where I'm going to end. So I think in my last words, right, what I'm going to say is that us who are coming up, being parents right now, I think we can do better, let's see our kids being in a place where let them be who they want to be. They want to be a dancer, let them be the best dancer there has ever been. They want to be a singer, let them be a singer. They want to be a pilot, let them be pilots. They want to be doctors, they want to be lawyers. Like, let them be in that space where they feel so natural. I love what Miles Monroe says, right? He says you need to find a gifting that feels natural, right? Like, it doesn't feel forced. It feels natural to you. Even when you're doing it, it feels natural to you. It's sad, especially when we go to like our hospitals right now. You will tell that people ain't enjoying what they're doing. They're all doing it for the sake of the money. Doctors, because I was sick, like, let's say a couple weeks ago, right? You can tell that some people are just doing it because they want to know, they just want it for the money, and that's the sad part. Because why? They were just forced into that industry because, quote unquote, there's tax in there, there's money in there, so just jump into it. That's what it is. But Miles says it better. You have to find something that is natural to you, that feels natural. Even when you're doing it, it doesn't feel forced. It feels, heavenly. Somebody can call you up at any time and you're willing to put in the work because it's natural to you. It doesn't feel like work. So be a disruptive thinker. Don't be a mediocre. From me and the house. See you on my next video. If you're on YouTube, subscribe to the page, drop me a comment. If you're on Facebook, drop me a comment too, and like my page. If you're on Spotify, make sure you subscribe, follow me, and yeah, I think that's all. But I'm an artist. I go by the name of Popen837. I have a new song that's out. It's titled High Power, featuring Dimitri and Aukanai, produced by Dimitri, by the way. Yeah, so make sure you go check it out. I'll put links below. From me and the house. It's been a pleasure having you guys. So thank you for having me. See ya.